The Indiana Fever were supposed to own All-Star Weekend. It was Indianapolis, their home city, buzzing with energy. The 2025 WNBA All-Star festivities were set to be a victory lap for a team that had gone from rebuilding to relevance in record time. And at the heart of it all was Caitlin Clark, the reigning WNBA Player of the Year, the face of the franchise, and the reason the Fever had gone from an afterthought to a ticket you couldn't buy without a waiting list.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
But in the span of one stunning press release, everything changed. Caitlin Clark would not be playing. Not in the three-point contest. Not in the main game. Not in anything. The reason? A groin injury. No one saw it coming. Clark had been her usual electric self in the weeks leading up to the break, knocking down logo threes, dishing impossible assists, and playing with the confidence of someone who seemed destined to own the weekend. Her withdrawal hit like a gut punch. Fans, teammates, and media were all scrambling for details, but the message from the Fever was simple. She needed to prioritize her health. For Clark, it wasn't about drama or headlines. It was about being smart. She's 23 years old with an entire career ahead of her. Missing a showcase weekend hurt, emotionally and professionally, but pushing through and risking a long-term setback could have been catastrophic. Her decision to step back was a mature one, the kind that shows she's thinking about her legacy, not just the next highlight reel. Still, that left a gaping hole in the Fever's all-star presence. That's when Lexy Hull stepped forward. Lexy wasn't supposed to be the one that weekend. She's a steady player, a fan favorite for her work ethic and consistency, but she's not the viral sensation Clark is. Yet when opportunity knocked, Lexy didn't just answer. She stepped in the spotlight while carrying something much heavier than the team's expectations. Lexy had just lost her dog, Maggie. Maggie wasn't just a pet. She'd been with Lexy for years, through college, through the ups and downs of chasing a professional career, through every lonely hotel room on the road. Losing her in the middle of the season was brutal. But Lexy didn't retreat. She put on the Fever jersey, stepped into Clark's role for the weekend, and played with a focus that could only come from turning personal grief into purpose. If Clark's injury was the public heartbreak, Lexy's loss was the quiet one. The kind fans often never hear about, the kind that reminds you that athletes live real, complicated lives outside the box score. And then there was Sophie Cunningham. Sophie isn't just a veteran presence on the Fever. She's their anchor. She's the voice that keeps everyone steady when things go sideways, the teammate who'll go to war for you on the court and checking on you off it. Fans call her the protector for a reason. She plays with an edge, she's never afraid to speak up, and she's fiercely loyal to her people. When Clark went down and Lexy stepped up, Sophie was the glue holding everything together. She handled the press questions. She defended her teammates against any criticism. She reminded everyone, fans, opponents, and maybe even the Fever themselves, that this was still a team to be feared. Together, the three of them, Caitlin, Lexy, and Sophie, have become something more than just a trio of starters. Fans have given them a nickname, Trace Leches. On the surface, it's funny and catchy. But dig deeper, and it's the perfect description for what they bring. Three different flavors that somehow combine into something richer than the sum of its parts. Clark is the lightning, the scorer, the spark, the reason every camera in the building is pointed at her. Lexy is the steady sweetness, the quiet strength, the one who keeps the rhythm going even when everything else feels chaotic. Sophie is the spice, the energy, the protector, the one who makes sure no one messes with her people. Their bond didn't happen overnight. The Fever weren't always this tight-knit. 2 seasons ago, this was a team that looked more like a collection of talented strangers than a cohesive unit. There were communication breakdowns, chemistry issues, and a sense that the locker room wasn't fully in sync. That started to change when Sophie arrived. She brought with her a sense of accountability and a ride-or-die mentality that started rubbing off on everyone else. And when Clark was drafted, bringing an avalanche of media attention and expectations with her, Sophie made sure the locker room didn't crack under the pressure. Lexy's role in this transformation can't be overlooked either. She's not the loudest voice, but she's the one who keeps the small things right. The one who notices when a teammate's energy is off. The one who bridges the gap between the rookies and the vets. Over time, the Fever became more than just a team. They became a family. And Trace Letches became the heart of that family. That's why Clark's absence from All-Star Weekend didn't just hit the fans. It hit the team in a personal way. They'd all been looking forward to celebrating her breakout year on their home turf. They'd all been ready to watch her own the moment. And suddenly, she was sidelined. Lexy and Sophie could have treated the weekend like a lost cause. Instead, they decided to honor Clark by showing the league what the Fever were made of, that even without their biggest star, they were still a force. Lexy played like a woman with something to prove. Every shot, every defensive stop, every hustle play felt like a statement, not just for herself, but for the friend who couldn't be there. Sophie played her role to perfection, keeping the team's energy high and reminding everyone that the Fever's identity is built on resilience, not just highlight reels. And Clark? She was there, just not in uniform. She spent the weekend on the sidelines, cheering, laughing, and being exactly what the Fever needed her to be, a supportive presence, even when it must have been killing her not to play. Fans watching from the stands and at home saw more than just basketball that weekend. They saw the bond. The way Sophie would check on Lexy during timeouts. The way Lexy would glance toward Clark after a big play. The way Clark would stand and clap like she was the proudest teammate in the arena. The injury, the loss, the leadership, all of it came together into something you can't fake, genuine connection. And that's the real story of Trace Letches. It's not about stats or awards or even wins and losses, though they've had plenty of all three. It's about what happens when talent, loyalty, and friendship collide. This is why the Fever are becoming one of the most admired teams in the league. It's why free agents are looking at Indianapolis differently. It's why opposing teams know that beating the Fever isn't just about outplaying them. It's about breaking through a wall of trust and unity that's hard to crack. Because when you have a group like Caitlin, Lexy, and Sophie, when you have Trace Letches, you're not just playing for a paycheck or a stat line. You're playing for each other. And if there's one thing this All-Star Weekend proved, it's that even in moments of heartbreak, that bond doesn't just survive, it thrives. The Fever walked into All-Star Weekend without their brightest star on the court, but they walked out with something even more important. A reminder to the league, to the fans, and to themselves that this is a team built to last. And when Clark is healthy again, Trace Letches is going to be even harder to stop. When the news first broke that Clark would miss the All-Star festivities, it wasn't just fans who felt the gut punch. It was her teammates. This wasn't supposed to be her rest and rehab weekend. This was supposed to be the victory lap after a season where she'd gone from college phenom to WNBA Player of the Year in record time. The All-Star stage was built for her. The spotlights, the sold-out arena, the national coverage, and the narrative of a young star delivering for her home crowd. But the thing about sports is that the game doesn't care about your perfect script. One injury, one moment, and the story changes. Clark's decision to sit out was made quickly, but not lightly. She could have forced herself onto the court for the sake of appearances, to soak up the applause, to keep the spotlight. But that's not how she operates. She plays the long game. The choice to protect her body over immediate glory was a career move disguised as a medical one. It said, "I'm here for the next 10 years, not just the next 10 days." And while she made that call for herself, it ended up being a challenge for the whole Fever roster. Who was going to step up? Who was going to keep the energy high when the city's biggest draw was sitting courtside instead of draining logo threes? That's where Lexy Hull came in. Lexy's not the kind of player who chases headlines. She's the grinder, the glue piece, the one whose impact doesn't always show up in highlight packages, but is felt in every possession. But this time, she had to be more than steady. She had to fill the void Clark left behind. And she did it while navigating something most people in the arena didn't even know about, the grief of losing her dog, Maggie. For Lexy, Maggie wasn't just a pet. She was a constant presence, a steady comfort through the chaos of a pro athlete's life. Losing her was like losing a piece of home. But instead of pulling back, Lexy leaned in. She took on the extra minutes, the extra shots, the extra responsibility, channeling her grief into her game. That's the thing people often miss about athletes. They don't get to pause their careers for personal loss. They have to carry it onto the court and still perform. Lexy did that with grace, and it didn't go unnoticed by her teammates. And then there's Sophie Cunningham, the spark plug, the shield, the heartbeat of the Fever. If Clark is the scoring engine and Lexy is the stabilizer, Sophie is the one who makes sure no one touches her people without consequences. She's the first one to step between a teammate and an opponent in a heated moment. The first one to speak up in the locker room when something needs to be said. The one who refuses to let anyone, whether it's the media, the refs, or an opponent, forget that the Fever are a unit. During All-Star Weekend, Sophie wasn't just playing her role on the court. She was playing her role everywhere. In interviews, she set the tone, celebrating Lexy's resilience, reassuring fans about Clark's recovery, and making sure the focus stayed on what the Fever could do without their star, not what they were missing. If you watched closely, you saw her at every timeout, talking to Lexy, checking in with Clark, keeping the group energy locked in. Leadership isn't about speeches, it's about presence. And Sophie's presence is exactly why this team didn't fold under the weight of the weekend's disappointment. That's the magic of Trace Letches. To outsiders, the nickname is just a cute fan creation, a sugary, meme-ready label for three players who happen to be close friends. But to Fever fans, it's something deeper. It's shorthand for the chemistry and trust that's been building in Indianapolis. 2 seasons ago, the Fever didn't have this. They were a talented group without a true identity, a roster of individuals rather than a family. There were flashes of potential, but no one could pretend the culture was rock solid. Then Sophie arrived, bringing her firebrand personality and her no-nonsense approach to accountability. Then Clark was drafted, bringing talent and media attention the franchise hadn't seen in years. And Lexy, already there, became the bridge between the old and the new. That's how Trace Letches was born. Not through branding meetings or marketing pushes, but through shared moments. Long road trips, post-practice hangouts, quiet pep talks after bad games, and loud celebrations after good ones. It's why the Fever's transformation feels so organic. They didn't just get better because they added talent. They got better because they built trust. When All-Star Weekend arrived without Clark in uniform, that trust was tested. Lexy had to prove she could carry a bigger load. Sophie had to prove she could rally the team and the fans when the biggest draw was sidelined. And Clark had to prove that even when she couldn't contribute physically, she could still be a leader from the bench. The results? They didn't just survive the weekend. They owned it in a different way. Lexy hit big shots and made hustle plays that drew roars from the home crowd. Sophie played with her trademark edge, reminding everyone that the Fever are never an easy out. And Clark cheered, laughed, and supported like her teammates' success was her own, because it was. Fans saw it. Opponents saw it. The rest of the league saw it. The lesson? This team's strength isn't just in Clark's shooting range or Sophie's grit or Lexy's steadiness. It's in the way those strengths connect. In pro sports, talent gets you attention. Chemistry keeps you winning. And the Fever have both. That's why free agents are starting to circle Indianapolis. It's why Fever games are becoming events, not just matchups. It's why the nickname Trace Letches has stuck, because it represents something fans can feel: authenticity. It's not a forced marketing gimmick. It's real. It's lived. It's the product of 3 women who care about each other as people first and as players second. Caitlin Clark's absence at All-Star Weekend could have been the story of what the Fever lost. Instead, it became the story of what they've built. When she returns healthy, and she will, she's coming back to a team that's more confident, more battle-tested, and more united than the one she left. Lexy has proven she can step up in big moments. Sophie has proven she can lead in high-pressure situations. And Clark has shown that her leadership extends beyond the court. That's why, when Trace Letches is back at full strength, the Fever won't just be a playoff team. They'll be a contender. Because in the end, All-Star Weekend didn't weaken them. It reminded them, and the league, that their bond is their biggest weapon. And that's something no injury can sideline. When you strip away the lights, the cameras, and the screaming fans, professional sports are still about people. That's the core of what's happened in Indianapolis. The Fever have turned a group of players into a support system. And that didn't happen overnight or by accident. 2 years ago, this wasn't the vibe. The Fever were a young, inconsistent team with flashes of brilliance and long stretches of frustration. They were building through the draft, trying to find their identity and struggling to string wins together. The chemistry wasn't toxic, but it wasn't cohesive either. You could feel that there wasn't a strong, emotional thread tying everyone together. That started to change when Sophie Cunningham walked into the locker room. Sophie's impact. From the moment she arrived, Sophie didn't just play hard. She held people accountable. She called out lazy passes in practice. She pushed teammates to communicate better on defense. She made a point to celebrate small wins, the hockey assist pass, the drawn charge, the perfect box out, just as loudly as the big plays. She also brought something the Fever badly needed: protection. In a league where physical play can cross the line fast, Sophie made sure her teammates knew she'd have their backs. That kind of presence doesn't just make players feel safer, it makes them play freer. They know that if someone takes a cheap shot, Sophie will be the first to step in and the last to back down. By the time Caitlin Clark was drafted, Sophie had already set the tone, and that made Clark's transition into the league smoother than it might have been. Clark's arrival. Caitlin Clark's rookie year was the kind of debut that changes a franchise's trajectory. She wasn't just scoring, she was redefining what the Fever could be. Suddenly, Fever games were must-watch events. Tickets sold out. Jerseys flew off shelves. National broadcasters couldn't get enough of her. That kind of attention can make or break a locker room. For some teams, it creates jealousy or resentment. But the Fever handled it differently, in part because Sophie's leadership made sure the spotlight didn't burn anyone. She framed Clark's success as team success. If Caitlin's threes brought in more fans, that meant more energy for everyone. If Caitlin's name trended on social media, that brought attention to the whole roster. Lexy Hull's quiet power. Then there's Lexy Hull. She's not loud. She's not flashy. But she's steady, and in sports, steady as gold. Lexy's the one who notices when a teammate's body language changes mid-practice. She's the one who texts after a rough game, not to talk basketball, but to check in on life. When Maggie, her dog, passed away, Lexy could have easily pulled back. That kind of loss can be isolating, especially during a demanding season. But Lexy didn't just show up. She leaned into her role even harder. She kept her routines. She showed up early for shoot-arounds. She supported her teammates like nothing had changed, even though she was hurting. That resilience is why she was ready when Clark's injury forced her into a bigger role during All-Star Weekend. She didn't try to become Clark 2.0. She played her own game. Solid defense, smart passes, timely shots. She brought exactly what the Fever needed without forcing it. Trace Letches, more than a nickname. By the time All-Star Weekend rolled around, the bond between Caitlin, Lexy, and Sophie had a life of its own. The Trace Letches nickname came from fans, but it stuck because it felt real. It's not about marketing. It's about three women who've been through enough together to trust each other completely. When Clark went down, that trust showed. Sophie didn't have to guess how Lexy would respond. She knew Lexy would be ready. Lexy didn't have to wonder if Clark would be supportive. She knew Clark would be the loudest voice from the bench. That's why, even without their star guard in uniform, the Fever didn't crumble under the all-star spotlight. They adapted. What fans saw that weekend? Fans who showed up expecting a Caitlin Clark highlight reel got something different. And maybe even more important, they saw a team that refused to let one setback define their weekend. They saw Sophie hyping up her teammates after every defensive stop. They saw Lexy hit big shots and then point to Clark on the bench. They saw Clark laughing, clapping, and shouting encouragement like she was still on the court. It was a reminder that winning isn't just about who's playing. It's about how everyone plays their part, even from the sidelines. Why this matters for the Fever's future. This wasn't just a feel-good weekend for the Fever. It was a glimpse into why they're set up for long-term success. In professional sports, talent cycles come and go. Players get traded. Stars retire. Rookies emerge. But culture, the trust, the connection, the willingness to go all in for each other, that's what sticks. That's what turns a good year into a sustained run of success. The Fever have that now. They've built it on the backs of leaders like Sophie, stabilizers like Lexy, and game changers like Clark. And the scary thing for the rest of the league? They're just getting started. Caitlin Clark's role in all this. It might sound strange, but Clark's absence during All-Star Weekend actually added to her leadership credibility. She could have disappeared, avoided the cameras, and focused on rehab. Instead, she stayed present. She stayed engaged. She showed the younger players, and some veterans, that leadership isn't just about scoring points. It's about showing up for your team, no matter the circumstance. When Clark's healthy again, she's walking back into a locker room that knows exactly what it's about. She won't have to carry the entire team on her shoulders, because Lexy and Sophie have already proven they can step up. The message to the league. If you're an opposing coach, this is the part that should make you nervous. The Fever's chemistry is now one of their biggest weapons. You can scout plays. You can defend the pick and roll. But you can't coach your team into breaking another team's bond. That's why Trace Letches works. They aren't just teammates. They're friends. They share meals, inside jokes, and life moments. That kind of connection doesn't just go away when the season ends. It carries over. It builds. And it makes them harder to beat every year they're together. The bigger picture. The Fever's transformation is also a lesson for the rest of the WNBA. Talent acquisition is important, but so is emotional intelligence. Building a winning roster isn't just about finding the best shooters or defenders. It's about finding people who elevate each other. The Fever's rise has already started to shift how players around the league see Indianapolis. Free agents are noticing the vibe. Other teams are trying to replicate the closeness they see in Trace Letches. Fans are flocking not just because of Clark's scoring, but because they feel connected to the people wearing the jerseys. What comes next? When Clark returns, Trace Letches will be whole again. And if the Fever were this resilient without their star guard, imagine what they'll be when she's back on the floor, healthy and hungry. Lexy will be sharper from having played under extra pressure. Sophie will keep setting the emotional tone. And Clark will have a deeper appreciation for the team around her, knowing they held it down when she couldn't. That's the kind of foundation championship runs are built on.